Imagine waking up one morning, not to the usual hum of routine, but to a gnawing ache, a pull towards something you know doesn't serve you, yet you can't seem to escape. It might be a substance, a behavior, a thought pattern, or even a way of living that keeps you tethered to a cycle of craving and regret. That restless urge, that quiet desperation behind your addiction, isn't just a weakness or a flaw, it's a message, a deeply personal signal trying to lead you somewhere profoundly important. Today, we're diving into one of the most misunderstood struggles of our time: addiction. Not as a disease to be cured, but as a call to awaken, a doorway to transformation. And we're going to explore a ritual Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, used to help his patients break free from the chains of addiction, not by fighting it, but by listening to it. If you've ever felt trapped by a habit, if you've ever wondered why you keep returning to something that dims your light, or if you've tried to break free only to feel pulled back, this video is for you. By the end of our journey, you'll not only understand the hidden meaning behind your addiction, but also discover a powerful ritual, one rooted in Jung's profound insights that can change the way you relate to yourself and your life forever. To begin, we must acknowledge something most people avoid. Addiction is not just a behavior, it's a signal. It's not the enemy, it's a messenger. Behind that compulsive urge lies an intelligence, a part of you crying out for something you've lost or never fully claimed. Carl Jung, whose work revolutionized psychology, saw addiction not as a moral failing, but as a spiritual crisis, a disconnection from the deeper self. He believed that what drives addiction is a longing for wholeness, misdirected toward external fixes. In his words, every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism. But what if the problem isn't the addiction itself? What if it's what the addiction is trying to tell you? Jung observed that his patients, whether struggling with alcohol, drugs, or compulsive behaviors, were often searching for something transcendent, something sacred. He called this the numinusum, the divine spark within that seeks connection to meaning, purpose, and the eternal. When that connection is blocked, when life feels hollow or fragmented, we turn to substitutes, temporary escapes that mimic the feeling of wholeness but never truly deliver. If you've ever chased a high only to crash into emptiness, you know this truth. The bottle, the screen, the endless scroll, the rush of a habit, they promise relief, but they leave you hungrier than before. This is the paradox of addiction, and it's where Jung's ritual begins to shine a light. Let's take a step back. What is addiction, really? It's not just about the thing you can't stop doing. It's about what you're running from. Jung believed that addiction arises when we're estranged from our true selves, when we live out of alignment with our soul's purpose. He described the psyche as a dynamic system, with the conscious ego and the unconscious soul in constant dialogue. When we ignore the soul's whispers, our deepest desires, fears, or truths, the unconscious fights back. It manifests as restlessness, as craving, as a pull towards something that feels like salvation but acts like a cage. The question isn't, how do I stop, but what am I avoiding? And that's where Jung's ritual comes in. Jung developed a practice for his patients that wasn't about willpower or abstinence alone. It was about confronting the shadow, the hidden, unacknowledged parts of ourselves that fuel addiction. He believed that addiction thrives in the dark, in the places we refuse to look. His ritual was a process of turning toward that darkness with courage and curiosity, not to defeat it, but to understand it. This ritual isn't a quick fix, it's a journey inward, a sacred practice that invites you to meet yourself fully, wounds, longings, and all. Are you ready to explore it? Let's dive deeper. Jung taught that every human psyche contains a shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, suppress, or fear. It might be shame, grief, unexpressed creativity, or a longing for freedom we've buried under responsibility. When we push these parts away, they don't disappear, they fester. Addiction, in Jung's view, is often the shadow's way of demanding attention. That glass of wine, that compulsive check of your phone, that need to control, it's not random. It's your unconscious trying to fill a void, to soothe a wound you haven't named. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how your addiction flares up when you're stressed, lonely, or disconnected? That's no accident. Jung saw these moments as the psyche's attempt to signal a deeper need. The ritual he used with his patients began with a simple but radical act: sitting with the craving. Not acting on it, not suppressing it, but observing it with curiosity. He would ask his patients to pause in the moment of urge and ask, "What is this feeling trying to tell me? What am I really seeking?" This is the first step of the ritual, creating a space of stillness to listen to the addiction, not as an enemy, but as a guide. In our modern world, this is harder than it sounds. We're conditioned to distract ourselves, to scroll, to work, to numb. Silence feels unbearable because it forces us to face what we've avoided. But Jung knew that only in this stillness can we hear the soul's voice. He often guided his patients to journal in these moments, writing down the emotions, memories, or images that surfaced when the craving hit. What they discovered was startling. The urge wasn't just about the substance or behavior. It was about a deeper hunger for connection, for meaning, for a sense of being truly alive. Let me ask you this. When you feel that pull toward your addiction, what's underneath it? Is it fear of failure? A longing for rest? A need to feel seen? These questions are the beginning of Jung's ritual, and they're not easy, but they're necessary, because behind every addiction is a story waiting to be heard. A story about who you are, what you've lost, and what you're meant to reclaim. Jung's ritual wasn't just about introspection. It was alchemical. He drew on the ancient art of alchemy, which he saw as a metaphor for psychological transformation. In alchemy, base metals are transformed into gold through a process of dissolution, purification, and rebirth. Similarly, Jung believed that addiction could be transformed, not by fighting it, but by moving through it. The ritual's second step was to engage the unconscious through active imagination, a technique Jung pioneered. Active imagination involves entering a meditative state and dialoguing with the images, feelings, or figures that arise in your psyche. For his patients struggling with addiction, Jung would guide them to visualize their craving as a symbol or a character. Perhaps it appeared as a shadow figure, a wounded child, or a restless spirit. He'd ask, "What does this figure want? What does it need to say?" By giving the addiction a voice, patients could uncover its deeper message. One might discover that their drinking was a way to silence grief. Another might find that their compulsive working was a shield against feeling unworthy. This process wasn't about analyzing the addiction logically, but about meeting it on its own terms, in the realm of the soul. Jung believed that the unconscious speaks in symbols, and by engaging these symbols, we integrate the shadow rather than rejecting it. This integration is what begins to loosen addiction's grip. It's not about willpower, it's about wholeness. As Jung wrote, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This step requires courage because it means facing what you've spent years running from, but it's also liberating. When you dialogue with your addiction, you begin to see it not as a monster, but as a part of you that's been misunderstood. And in that understanding, transformation begins. The final stage of Jung's ritual was about reclaiming meaning. He believed that addiction often stems from a spiritual starvation, a disconnection from the numinosum, the divine within. To break free, his patients needed to rediscover what made them feel alive, not through external fixes, but through inner alignment. This meant reconnecting with their unique purpose, what Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. For Jung, this wasn't about grand gestures. It was about small, intentional acts that honored the soul. He might encourage a patient to paint, to write, to spend time in nature, or to explore myths and dreams, anything that rekindled their connection to the deeper self. He saw these acts as sacred, as ways of feeding the psyche what it truly craved. Over time, these practices began to replace the addiction, not because the craving disappeared, but because it was no longer the only path to feeling whole. Let's pause and reflect. What makes you feel truly alive? What have you set aside because it felt impractical or selfish? Jung's ritual asks you to reclaim these parts of yourself. Not tomorrow, not when you're fixed, but now. One patient of Jung's, struggling with alcoholism, found solace in gardening. Another, trapped in compulsive behaviors, rediscovered her love for poetry. These weren't cures, they were lifelines, threads that wove them back into their own story. Here's the truth most don't tell you. Your addiction is not your enemy. It's a wounded part of you crying out for wholeness. And Jung's ritual, stillness, shadow work, active imagination, and reconnection, offers a path to answer that cry. It's not about perfection, it's about presence. It's about choosing moment by moment to live from your soul rather than your wounds. If you're feeling trapped right now, know this. Your addiction is not the end of your story. It's a chapter, a painful, powerful chapter that's inviting you to wake up. Jung's ritual is a reminder that you are not your habits, your cravings, or your past. Beneath it all is a self so vast, so luminous that no addiction can diminish it. The question is, will you answer the call? Will you sit with the discomfort, listen to the shadow, and take one small step toward what makes you whole? This is your moment, not to escape the struggle, but to meet it. To ask, what is my addiction trying to teach me? To begin dialogue with your deeper self. Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Your addiction, as painful as it is a doorway to that privilege. It's a call to remember who you are beneath the noise, the habits, the masks. And when you begin to answer that call, something extraordinary happens. You don't just break free from addiction. You awaken to a life that feels like home. So here's my final question for you. What would your life look like if you stopped running from your shadow and started listening to its truth? If that question stirs something in you, if it sparks curiosity, hope, or even unease, then this is your invitation. Take one step. Sit with the craving, ask it what it wants, and begin the sacred work of becoming whole.